All right, I will say good evening. Let us begin. So tonight's daf is your test, and we are picking up Emir Hashem on your test. And we left off Masnisin Leka, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 lines up from the bottom. So the Gemara says Masnisin Leka. Are there no other cases in the Mishnah, ultimately, again, that deal with situations where halakha l'maisa, someone defies rabbinic authority and therefore there's a penalty against the individuals? There's no such thing as like that. There are no additional cases. I have a ha disnan. But what about the following case? So it's the famous maisa. Disnan chatcho chulios v'nasan chol bein chulya l'chulya. So we'll say, so just a word of introduction about this. Rashi brings this down, but I'll tell you it outside. So we know that halakha l'maisa, kli, a utensil, is capable of becoming tamei. Right, receiving tumah. Now, once the kli becomes tamei, the kli remains tamei ultimately until it loses its kli status. How does something lose its kli status? Usually, if it's deconstructed in some way. So, for example, the only issue on a simple case, let's say if you had a bowl that became tamei. So, how can you easily remove the tumah status? If you make a hole in the bowl so that it's no longer capable of being a receptacle, so then it loses its tumah status. Earthenware vessels, in order for them to lose their tumah status, really have to be fundamentally deconstructed. So, here's the interesting case. Let's say you have an oven. Right, and when the Gemara talks about oven, it means like a portable oven. So imagine for a moment you cut the oven into sections, and then what happened? And then you put sand in between each of these sections in order to kind of glue it back together. I see if you glue the sections back together with sand. So both say, so now what's the shaila? The shaila is, do we say that since the oven was cut up into pieces, it lost its identity as a kli utensil, therefore lost its tumah status, and even though you put it back together, it's like a new kli. Now it's a brand new utensil. So Rabbi Elazar said it's tahar. In other words, it lost its tumah status, and now it is tahar. The Chachamim mitamin. The Chachamim say no, it's tamei. The Chachamim hold that halacha l'maisa, since you put it back together, ultimately, again, it regains its former identity, and now, ultimately, again, it is tamei. It's tamei. So we'll say fundamental machlokes. Now we'll say, now what's interesting about this case over is Rabbi Eliezer was a singular opinion. The Chachamim were the majority opinion. Yet Rabbi Eliezer held his ground. V'zeu tanoro shel achnoi. So now we'll say, this is the famous story of the tanor shel achnoi. Mar says, my achnoi, what's achnoi? Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel melamed shekifua halachos keachnoi zeh v'tamuha. What it means that the rabbis, the Chachamim, surrounded Rabbi Eliezer with proofs, like a serpent, right? Like a snake wraps itself around its prey. They surrounded him with proofs that he was incorrect, and ultimately, again, that in fact, that halacha l'maisa would be tamei. Now, we'll say, now, the unspoken part of the story is Rabbi Eliezer refused to back down. He refused to back down. And I will say, now, in halacha, we have the concept ultimately of achari rabbim lahatos. Halacha is decided by the majority. And the minority must go ahead and yield to the decisions of the majority. That's the halacha. And in fact, if you have a sage who refuses to yield to the majority opinion, that's what we call in halacha zakin mamre. Zakin mamre. Such a person is put to death. B'tanya, osa hayom, that day, heviu kol taros shetir Rabbi Elazar. They brought all of the items that Rabbi Elazar in the past had declared ritually pure, the sarfum lefanov, right? And ultimately they burnt them. In other words, what they did is they essentially negated all of Rabbi Eliezer's past rulings. Ulabasof birchuhu, and they cursed him. Filuhachi. So the Gemara says, so the point over the Gemara is making over here is, you see, here's another case, ultimately again of someone who defied rabbinic authority and their repercussions. To which the Gemara says, "Afilu nidui b'masnisin lotinan." You're right, but it doesn't say anything explicitly about them excommunicating him in the Mishnah. All right. So we'll say here's the problem. This entire sugya was introduced to us with the statement of, in 24 places we find examples ultimately of where people were excommunicated because of flagrant violation of rabbinic law. So where did he come up with the 24? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi medamim milsa milsa. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi kind of equates different cases. In other words, whenever Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi sees a situation ultimately again, of a single individual refusing to yield before a collective opinion, he treats that as one of the cases. Rabbi Lazar, lo medamem mil sunos. Rabbi Lazar, on the other hand, does not go ahead and just automatically create comparisons. Okay, beautiful. So Rabbi says, now we're back to our regular sugya. Remember, again, we were talking about, we got started in our last Mishnah, was speaking about the halachos of those who are involved in the funeral, and specifically, what are their obligations regarding Shema and Shmona Esrei? So the next thing the Mishnah said was, no samita v'chilufeyan. Anyone carrying the funeral beer, and including the people who are going to carry it at a future moment, right? V'chilufeyan means those who are going to come in the next shift. So Tana Rabbanan, Shabbos says, interesting halacha. In motziin hasameis samach l'kriyas Shema. The halacha is we try not to do a levaya right by Zman Kriyas Shema. Right, we don't do it. Why? Obviously, the logic is sound because you don't want people to miss Shema. However, hischilu, if they started the levaya in mafsikin, we won't stop it. So ideally, when scheduling the levaya, we try to do it in a way where it's not going to conflict with Kriyas Shema. But if they already started the levaya, then ultimately, again, we don't stop them. Ini is that so? V'harav Yosef afku samach l'Kriyas Shema. But Rav Yosef, he began his levaya close to the time of Kriyas Shema. It's different. Adam Chashuv Shaini. Rav Yosef was an important person, and Adam Chashuv, an important person, is different. Okay. Shalifnei hamita v'shala achar hamita. So again, Tana Rabbanan. Here we go. Ha'oskim behesped bizman shames muto lifneihem. So let's listen to this. Those who are involved in the eulogies. Now remember, involved in eulogies means not lav dafka that they're giving the eulogies, but what it means is they're present. They're present. They're sitting there while the eulogies are being delivered. What's the halacha? Bizman shames muto lifneihem. That I will say when the deceased, when the body is there. Now I will say, understand. There are sometimes, we're used to, in our, I mean, like in America. So you're used to, even outside America, we're used to having a funeral in a funeral home, in a funeral home. So then obviously the deceased is there. So often people have levayas in different places. So for example, sometimes levayas were held in a shul. Well, the halacha is in a shul you do not bring in a body. The only bodies you bring into the shul is for the rav and the Eshes Rav, the Rebbetzin. Those are the only two bodies you bring into a shul. Everyone else, what they would do is, and sometimes this happens. I know, like in my parents' community, there's not really like a funeral home in the Yiddish. So what they do is the levayas take place in the shul. What happens is the hearse is parked right outside of the shul. The body is in the hearse. Everyone goes into the shul, for eulogies. Someone stays saying Tehillim with the body. So I'll say, that's why you see this distinction between like hespedim being given. For us it sounds strange. What do you mean eulogies are being given and the body's not there? So just point out, you could have scenarios like that, where eulogies are being given, everybody's assembled for the levaya, but for whatever the reason, the mace is not there. So watch this. So ha'oskim behesped, bizman shames muto lefneim. So those who are engaged in the eulogy, when the deceased is right there, nishmatin echad v'korin. Shabbos says, so remember again, since the deceased is there, it would be disrespectful for everybody just to get up and go say Kriyas Shema. And remember, the assumption over here is you're not going to say Kriyas Shema right there at the Hesped. Why not? So remember again, this goes back to what we learned before of Loig Larash. Right? Again, it's disrespectful to do mitzvos in the presence of the mace. So therefore, what you do is people absent themselves one at a time, right? So Reuven goes, Shimon goes, and that's Seidu Shema. Ein hameis motel lifneim. What if the corpse is not there? In other words, the body's not there. So they're delivering a spadim, but the body's not there. Hein yoshvin v'koren. So hein yoshvin v'koren. So we'll say in that case, if the body's not there, the truth is there's no problem. What can you do? Everybody could just sit in place and say Shema. Right? That's actually an easy case. Just sit in place and say Shema. V'hu yoshev v'domim. Now we'll say the who is the avel. The avel sits there and he is quiet. Right? Why is he quiet? Because remember, we'll say the avel during the Hespedim, during the Levaya, is still in what? In Aninos. And as such, he's exempt from all mitzvos. So whereas if the body's not there, everyone else could go ahead and say Kriyas Shema, and the Aval himself sits there and is quiet. Heim omdim mispalin. There was a similar idea. Let's say the Levaya is going long. Right? So now, again, they're nervous about Shmona Esrei. So they could actually, if the body's not there, they can get up and daven Shmona Esrei. excuse me, right there. V'hu omet umatzdik alav es hadin. Now, what does the Avel do when everyone else is davening Shemona Esrei? What does he do? He stands up and he does what's called Tziduk Hadin. Now, we do Tziduk Hadin today as well. Tziduk Hadin literally means it's the tefillah of acceptance of judgment. So, of acceptance of judgment. The essence of that tefillah is Hashem nasan, Hashem lakach, Yehi Shem Hashem meborach. Hashem is given, Hashem is taken, the name of Hashem is blessed. But here's what's interesting. So when everyone else gets up to say Shemona Esrei, the Avel also gets up, but he's not davening Shemona Esrei, because remember again, he's in Aninos. So what does he do? He does Tziduk Hadin. And what does he say as part of that Tziduk Hadin? But Omer, Ribon ha'olamim, Master of the universe, Harbe chatasi lifanecha, v'lo nifrasim imeni echa minei elef. Hashem, I have sinned much before you, and you have not extracted from me 1/1000th of what I am liable to you. So we'll say, so it's interesting here. It's interesting how, from the Avel's perspective, the Avel looks at the loss of a loved one as a form of punishment. Even though, again, I will say we are conditioned to understand that bad things happen for a variety of reasons, and not necessarily everything is a punishment. But the Avel says, Chadash Baruch Hu, I've sinned much, and again, at the end of the day, you've only extracted 1/1000th of what I'm truly liable to you. Yiratzam ofanecha Hashem Elokeinu, shetigdar pirtosenu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it should be your will. That literally, again, tigdar pirtosenu means you should literally repair our breaches, right? A pirtz is like a breach in a fence, a breach in a wall. You should repair our breaches. Upirtzos kol amcha beis Yisrael. And the breaches ultimately of all of Klal Yisrael, berachamim, with compassion. So this is interesting. Abaye says, Lo mi baile inish lemim rahachi. Abaye says, no way, do not say that. Do not say that. Now, do not say what? Now, what Abaye is taking issue with specifically is that phrase, Ribon ha'olamim, harbe chatasi lefanecha, v'lo nifresa mimeni echad minei elef. That phrase that I have sinned before you much, and you haven't taken, you haven't even taken from me 1/1000th of the liability that I have. Abaye says, don't say that. Why don't you say that? Abaye says, it's incredible. Why not? The Gemara says, D'amar b'Shimon Levi, v'cheintanam b'shet Rabbi Yossi, the olam al yiftach adam piv lasatan. Abaye say, here is this famous concept. A person shouldn't open up their mouth to the Satan. I will say, now what does that mean? That a person ultimately, we'll say a little bit of background to this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world with rachamim. He runs the world with compassion. Now, we'll say, how does compassion work? Or how does compassion operate? What divine compassion does is, even if I don't deserve God's mercy, He gives it to me. And even if I don't deserve bracha, He gives it to me. So because I recognize that I'm the beneficiary of much divine blessing that I don't deserve, it's important for me to acknowledge that and not to say things that are self-incriminating. Right? So therefore, Abaye says, you don't come before God and say, Kadosh Baruch Hu, I have sinned so much, and you haven't even punished me for 1/1000th of the stuff that I've done. God knows that. God is acutely aware of that. But don't say it. Don't say it, because at the end of the day, again, it's a self-incriminating statement. The idea being, as well say, sometimes when a person says things like that, it almost comes across almost like a shtickle self-righteous. So Abaye says, we all exist because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's profound compassion. The idea is we have to be smart about it, and we don't publicize the fact that we are living off divine compassion. As such, that's the concept of al tiftach peh satan, means don't go ahead and kind of engage the prosecuting angels against you. Don't get Beis Din Shalala worked up saying, Silber has all of this stuff that he does not deserve. So I'm Rav Yosef Mikra. Where do we see this concept of al tiftach peh satan, right? Where do we see this concept of kind of don't engage in self-incriminating words? Shene'emar kimat kistom hayinu. So we'll say this is incredible. So the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Yeshaya. So Yeshaya says, Luli Hashem tzavakos hosi lanu surid kimat kistom hayinu. Yeshaya says, we were almost like stone. He's talking about Klal Yisrael. We're so bad that we're almost like stone. It's a pretty significant statement. And then what happens? Maya hadalahu navi. What does the Navi respond? Shimu devar Hashem ketzine stone. Then Yeshaya calls them officers of stone. Listen up. In other words, they Klal Yisrael are the ones who made reference to the fact that are almost like stone. So Yeshaya said, okay, now listen up, you officers of stone. So the idea over here is you don't engage in self-incriminating statements or self-incriminating actions. Incredible. All right, we'll say, let's go back there. Kivru Asani. So we'll say, it's also just interesting how so there's a difference between acknowledging, essentially, Al Tiftach Pela Satan really seems to be not in a tshuva perspective, right? In a tshuva perspective, I'm supposed to say what I've done wrong, right? What's getting Abaye in the stand? What's getting Abaye is not a Kadosh Baruch Hu, I've sinned. What's getting Abaye is I've sinned, and you haven't even extracted from me 1/1000th of the punishment I deserve. Abaye is like, why? Why are you saying that? It might be true, but it doesn't seem to be a wise move to say it. That's different than tshuva, where again, in order to do complete tshuva, I have to own that which I've done wrong. Incredible idea. We'll say, I think kind of going with what Avi's saying also, there's very fine balance between, on one hand, you of course have to be honest with who you are and what your faults are. At the same time, also recognize that sometimes too much self-recrimination is also unhealthy, as it could allow a person to kind of lose a healthy sense of self. Okay, let's go back to Kavras Hameis V'Chazru. So we'll say, so remember again, actually, we'll stop over here for tonight. We'll pick up in Meretz Hashem at the 2 dots tomorrow. Kavras Hameis, Shkoyach.